Nice to meet you all. Can I just ask you to raise your hand if you have already faced the challenge of adoption? Like you are building the tool or the company is building the tool and then it works amazingly, yet when you look at the ROI on that investment, you're going like, ooh, or your CFO is going like, hey, where is my ROI? Is that familiar story? Yeah, okay, so this is what I'm going to unpack a little bit today. I'll tell you firstly why I'm speaking to you today, so what's been done. So as soon as ChatGPT came out, I was in a fortunate position to start a fairly large transformation program in the financial services company here in London. And at that time, there were no answers whatsoever, only questions, obviously. So I've partnered up with all the research labs, then also reached out to Harvard, who reached out then to Stanford, saying like, look guys, like what do we already know? Like, do we have any specific answers that can help us with adoption and understand how this technology could potentially be introduced into the organizations? And the answer was obviously like, no. So I said like, okay, we're doing this program regardless, let's actually join forces and run the research study as well. So that's what happened. Just to give you a short summary, the adoption program, we've run it for several years. We've experimented a lot. We've reached more than 85% adoption. And for any organization to get true transformation happening, we know that we need to reach 60%. So if 60% of your workforce is not fully embedding the technology, any tool that has been developed, it doesn't have to be generative AI, but it is specifically prominent for generative AI tools, then it's becoming a problem. And that the result was recognized, even to my massive surprise, by the Cabinet Office. So when they were doing the release of the latest framework that's been designed in conjunction with several research institutions, including Turing Institute, I was asked to present the case on how successful it all went. So now, like, without post-explaining why I'm talking, now let's actually look at what happened. And I would like to start with the fundamental numbers. So if you look, you can cut it in so many different ways. But from McKinsey, their research of close to 2,000 organizations, they're saying 88% of organizations have already bought and are using generative AI, but only 6% are reporting significant results, transformative results. If you start looking at FTSE 250, you're looking at roughly 76%, 3% actually reporting results. If you start looking purely at NASDAQ, the numbers are very much in the same ranges. So what it tells us is that the gap between buying the technology, like being bought into technology as an organization, that doesn't seem to exist much anymore. But then realizing the potential transformation and output of introducing that technology, it's a big problem. So I tried to summarize the learnings of those years into several critical aha moments that we encountered and that actually made that transformation possible. So firstly, unsurprisingly, it's less about the technology and much more about people. This is the first point. And I think it's really important to look at it and address it head on. I'll give you a little of, I'll tell you a small anecdote. I was exceptionally excited when we decided to set up this program of work. I had choice of basically getting people, organizing it, structuring, like full white page. So incredibly interesting creative task. Then that level of excitement did not translate to my colleagues. So I had the moment at the water cooler where a lady who I didn't really know very well came to me, and she wasn't particularly happy about my existence. And I was like, do you want to come on the program? Do you want to work with us? We're trying to figure out the use cases. We're building all these incredible applications. And she looked at me and she said, so you want me to come to you so you can actually get me fired? And I was like, oh, let's actually roll back a little bit some of our communications. So it was just before we actually had to do like a lot of talks and getting the program going. And we decided to structure it slightly differently. I was like, before we go anywhere, let's understand how people feel. And I know it was several years ago, and I know the sentiment has shifted, but fundamentally it hasn't shifted that much. So if you address, like actually, let's do the test here. How many of you are excited about generative AI? Okay. And how many of you are also uncomfortable with what future holds with generative AI?
From a security perspective.
Security perspective, workforce perspective, skills development perspective, like you name it, right? You can have the whole portfolio of concerns. So it's the first time in our careers where we're facing the situation where the level of excitement actually equals the level of fear. And we measured it very, very carefully. So we sent out the survey before we postponed the rollout of the program by a couple of weeks. So I was like, let's actually measure this. We went and we asked the employees, I was like, how do you feel? Like, what are you excited about? And it wasn't that obvious because we were asking more nuanced questions, like, what exactly are you excited about? And how, like, what are you hoping for this program will give and this technology will give this organization and you and your career, et cetera, et cetera. And then we've done the same on the opposite side, and what are your concerns? And I was really surprised by the fact that job displacement was actually the least of people's worries. It was much more nuanced. It was more about, will I enjoy my work? Will I find meaning in my work? Will I actually, will I be accountable for what I'm doing? So that gave us a little bit of a pause, and we reframed the whole program of work completely. We were like, okay, so we need to get people to come on board early on, and we need to make sure that they co-create it with us. So that's how the idea of Renaissance 13 by 13 happened. You can see it on this side here. So we decided we're going to run 13 experiments in 13 weeks. And the way we're going to design the experiments, we're not going to go with ROI. We're not going to go with the biggest problem the organization is facing, because that's not what we're solving for at this stage. We're solving it actually figuring out, can we do it all together? And then we just went and said, like, hey, what do you hate the most about your day or your week? Unsurprisingly, absolutely everyone has the answer to that question. Absolutely everyone. And then we basically very quickly, in a matter of days, we've collected a very long list of the problems that people wanted solving. And then very quickly we went through it, like matching, figuring out what can actually be a good experiment. Also matching it with the right technology and also the other technical questions that we wanted to answer for ourselves. And the movement of Renaissance 13 by 13 became really, really positive momentum in the organization as well. People were coming in. We did not have any shortages. At some point, we had to say, like, look, please, like, pause for 12 weeks, come back to us. Like, in 12 weeks' time, we will ask you again. And most importantly, we've also got people who had that very obvious fear. They were the opposite of buying. You know, they would be like, don't talk to me. We've got them to come and build with us as well. And they became the biggest advocates because we've solved the problem that they really struggled with, they hated, and they started communicating on our behalf. So became one of the best champions. So yes, technology is critically important. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, did you find that there was a lot more resistance from people that weren't in engineering and product and saw it as a threat to their job rather than an enabler?
Honestly, I found the biggest resistance in engineering.
Really?
Yes. Honestly, it was the most skeptical group. Like the organization I worked for has a very big. So more than 50% of the organization is technology, and it was very difficult to find the right champions in technology, actually, because the level of skepticism was quite high.
Interesting. At
that time. Yes. I don't think it's as high anymore, but at the very beginning it was quite challenging. So let's see, I'm gonna move next. Yes. The second part of the challenge that we've also identified helped us for a long-term program. If you're doing the short one, probably not so much, but for the long term, the intelligent orchestration was critical. I think we were reasonably smart in not going with the hype of OpenAI immediately. right? Because everybody just went and said like, oh, ChatGPT, let's build with ChatGPT, and etc. We did, of course, build with them, but we said like, we're actually going to measure a lot of models. And the sprints were designed in such a way that the first 1 or 2 weeks, we are just very crudely trying to solve the problem with every single model. And we knew what outcomes we wanted to achieve, and we saw like, okay, this one is performing better if you're solving creative text problem, or if you're solving a coding problem, if you're solving data problem. That gave us a really well-rounded picture at the foundations of every single model. Now they're much more capable, and in some areas they're becoming equal, but still not everywhere. So I think the question is which model is the right model for your task still stands. And when we were designing our whole layer, we wanted to make sure that we can switch quite quickly, because again, exponential change, right? Today it is the best performing model. Let's make it simple. For the coding task, tomorrow it might not be. So I wanted to make sure that we can actually reorchestrate it quite quickly with the minimum cost of the organization. And the final element that was actually in my team, so I was responsible for, I was a global head of data and AI transformation, and my team was constructed of 7 technical teams. So from AI engineers, data engineers, analytics engineers, you name it. So my point is slightly different here. What I found really interesting is that within my team, I was a massive advocate, of course, and I was encouraging everybody to start finding the use cases for the program of work that we run. So you're looking at the same leader, the same voice, the same messages, right? But very different adoption patterns across my org. And I was like, what's going on here? Let's apply some science to it. So we started measuring that as well. And what we saw is, interestingly, one team, they came and they pitched the headcount increase to me several times. And I tried, but for a whole portfolio of reasons, we could not secure that headcount increase. But the workload was growing for them. And the other team, they were a very well-established team, they were properly resourced, and they had their processes in place. So very different levels of maturity, but also very different level of workflow in terms of pressure. And guess what? For the team that has very limited resources, for them it was either this works or I quit situation, right? Because it's not manageable. And then the team that was well-resourced, and they actually did have time to experiment and define the workflows, they actually didn't adopt it to the same degree, not even close. So the team that was completely under-resourced was working like at least 60, 70-hour weeks. They very quickly reimagine their workflows. They've taken it not like what it can do. They've taken it, oh, it can do this, and then let's actually figure out next. And then they were like, hey, that headcount that we asked for, we actually don't need because we've managed to automate this part of the workflow, and this is the level of intervention that we have. So scarcity in this particular case turned out to be an opportunity. And now is the person who is managing a much smaller team and actually building the team herself from scratch. Now I can tell you that this principle applies beautifully in startup right now. So now if you're starting to have the conversations, or if you're faced with pressure associated with ROI, there is another very important learning. Micro gains. So we had use cases where we would have anything between 300-500% productivity gains. We had incredible gains, like some were even 1,300%. It's like incredible, right? By any stretch of the imagination, you're collapsing time on the task. That said, you go to the CFO office, and then the question is like, okay, show me where, right? What actually commercially changed for this organization? And the reality is not that much at this stage. So, and we were trying to understand this question deeper as well, as to why this is happening. And the reality is, like, when you start adopting generative AI, and you're starting adopting it for specific tasks, you are getting productivity gains, but the task exists within the workflow. And then the workflow, the whole organization is not one workflow, it's ecosystem of workflows. And then in re-engineering the ecosystem of the workflows is actually a really complicated task. I'll give you a very specific example. We went into a reasonably straightforward marketing process, which is an ecosystem of different workflows, but they were reasonably interconnected, and we had people who were very much on board and they wanted to make it happen. And we mapped it out so it's 7-stage process, and we've implemented 5 tools in the 7-stage process. Every single implementation was in hundreds when it comes to productivity increases, percentage productivity increase. But when we've actually put it all together, it was somewhere between 20 and 30. Why? Because the bottlenecks, they still remained. Right? So if we're taking the same process linearly and we're injecting generative AI at stages, we're not going to actually sum it up. It doesn't work that way. So, and this is that was a very interesting and hard learning to digest. And we started thinking, like, how can we actually change that? Because in reality, yes, you do need to make sure that people have the right tools, that they understand how to use them, that they start increasing their own productivity gains. But in reality, you actually need to have something else as well in the organization. And I'll talk to you about it in a minute. And that is the innovation engine. So in the study, what we identified is that people, there were 3 groups. We had people who were technologists and knew, of course, like how to make the most out of the tech. We had people who were subject matter experts, and we also have taken the group who were adjacent to subject matter experts. So they could be junior people, so they don't have very strong expertise, but they're developing that expertise, they're familiar with the subject, or they're coming from the org that is very similar or like nearby. So they have some understanding, but they don't have deep expertise. And at that time, you might remember that prompt engineering was the skill of the future, the profession of the future, and that was that everybody talked about. Granted, 2 years back. It's still incredibly valuable and still a very important skill, but now we're starting to expand, we're starting to understand that it's much more broad and diverse, and it's not only about prompt engineering, and the expertise is really critical. So we try to measure exactly that. We try to understand, what if you know the tool exceptionally well, will you perform as well as the expert? Will you outperform the expert? Will you underperform? Where would you be? And then we've also taken the experts, given them the tools, as I've explained. So who thinks that the technologist won in the task? Who thinks that technologist team outperformed? No, not many. Okay. Who thinks that the experts outperformed? Okay, a couple of people. Who thinks that people who were in the middle, so not technologists, but not necessarily subject matter experts, gained a lot from tech? Okay, interesting. Actually, experts won by far, by a mile, by a mile. So, and interestingly, why? Because you can't replace judgment that is developed through years of experience. Yes, you are not executing on the task, but what we saw, the technologists, they really lack judgment, because we've taken them out of their zone of either writing code or architecture, etc., and we've asked them to do a very business-related subject. They were lacking judgment in some critical areas, and they were applying the knowledge of building products to something that was completely different. So all the suggestions and changes that they've introduced, they were actually impacting negatively the output of the experiment. Then the subject matter experts, their productivity increased significantly. Their productivity, the speed to completion was incredible, and also they heavily leveraged their expertise, their judgment. So they could very quickly understand. And I'm sure you're facing the situation. I'm sure you're using the technology already, and you're facing the situations on a daily basis where you need only 2 or 3 seconds to know whether this is a good output or not, and whether you actually have to sit down and do it yourself. So now going back to the innovation engine. So when we've learned that, we thought, how do you actually start tackling this really complex beast of an organization with all this maze of the workflows that are interconnected? And we thought that the only way to do it is if you actually have a group of people who are continuously staying on top of the latest technological developments. So usually this would be a technologist group, and they're regularly paired up with the subject matter experts, be it legal, be it compliance, be it marketing, finance. That doesn't really matter which vertical you are taking, but to ask either or to achieve transformation and achieve strong adoption for generative AI, it's not going to work. So you actually need these two groups to come together. And then this cycle is basically rinse and repeat, right? So you map it out, but as I said, we've tried to do it linearly and it didn't work. And when we stepped back and we started reimagining how the workflow could look like through AI first principles, then it looks totally different. And the challenge of tackling it within the organization that already has character is not simple. So yes, I already mentioned who finds the use cases. Ideally, you would be asking, you will be finding the way of getting your subject matter experts to find the use cases. They definitely need to make, people who will support them to understand what the workflow looks like, what the ideal outcome would look like, and of course, everything needs to be hand in hand with the technology. So so I already outlined the research, so that the paper is called Generative AI Wall Effect. It's, I think, 40-something pages long, quite scientific read if you're interested. But also, if yesterday it went online on HBR as well, so if you Google my name, it will be one of the latest HBR articles that is online, and it's much easier. It's a very simple read. It loses a lot of nuance, but gives you a strong summary. Yep. Yes, and you probably noticed that I have a very different logo, not financial services logo here at all. So after having delivered that program and spent some time both with research institutions and also with several other big organizations, I thought about the fact that this gap exists, and getting experts to adopt technology is not that straightforward. Because you can't really give people, I don't know, let's take compliance as an example. You can't really give compliance people a general course about this is ledgering model, this is how it thinks, this is how you prompt it, and assume that they will be able to immediately figure out how to apply it to their workflows. There will be some obvious low-hanging fruits, but they are not transformative. They're helping people, of course, and they're making potentially their life easier. But from an organizational point of view, they're not transforming and they're not justifying the investment, so which makes it a quite hard internal conversation. And then I thought about the fact that you actually need to have a very highly personalized approach to this. And then I thought about the fact that with the current technological landscape, for the first time, we can actually try to attempt to build highly personalized technology. And that's what Renaissance AI is building. So we're early stage. We have first client, it's a large banking group. We have done the pilot, we're running the pilot with them, and it's a highly personalized product where you choose the product that your company bought, you choose the industry you're in, you choose your profession, then we try to understand what you already know, what you don't know. We kind of have our own algorithms to what people should know, and then we have also the workflows that people would be stumbling upon in those particular professions. And then it's a very much simulation-based training program for people. So the first results, where is it? Do I have it here? Yes. I was super surprised to hear feedback from our initial user group. They're saying that they love the character of the product. And yes, we do talk in the dev team, we do talk a lot about the character of the product, but trust me, what we have in mind and what's been implemented is like, in the best case scenario, 10%. You know, we're so early in this journey. And the fact that it's already coming through and people are saying like, hey, it's like talking to a friend. Like I don't feel like I'm doing the corporate training anymore. I'm feeling like I'm actually being coached by a good friend and it's friendly. So that's us. If this strikes a chord with anyone here, we are currently having 2 opportunities to find the design partners for us. We won't be able to take any more at this early stage. With the companies that haven't identified this as a problem and also who are willing to work with the startup, knowing that they are going to co-design the solution with us. So, yeah, any questions?